Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see there are so many people on our web chat already. As you've seen, we are going to host a conference in September. It's going to be at Sun City, and we are really, really excited about the whole Success by Design theme that we have. So today we are going to look at ponderings of um, town proclamation in mine closure. And this has been a very hot topic in South Africa. I am going to give another 2 minutes for attendees just to get on the call, because we did hear that there was some technical difficulties even for some of our council members to get on. So let's just wait 2 more minutes and then I will introduce William MacDonald to you. Okay, so Teresa, I just need to ask you to give William presenter rights. And while she's doing that, I'm going to just state that I've got the pleasure to introduce William MacDonald to you. He was privileged to grow up in Cape Town, where he attended Wynberg Boys High School. Thereafter, he studied geology, where he obtained a BSc honors and later a master's degree in economic sedimentology at Stellenbosch. He also obtained a commercial diving qualification to enable him to be a diving geologist and a graduate diploma in mining engineering, surface engineering. He spent most of his working years in the real arid areas of southern Africa, where he worked for Namdeb and later for De Beers, both in Kleinseer and Finch Diamond Mine. His roles varied from exploration project management and material resource management to marine biology, mine closure, community development, and municipal service delivery, to name a few. He's currently a consultant assisting with municipal matters and town proclamations. In his spare time, he likes to grow weeds, herbs, and vegetables. He also excels at natural pool designs and dabbles in artisanal gin making. He's a member of the Geological Society of Southern Africa. He's a registered member of SATNASP and, of course, a LaRSSA member. And now I will hand over to William MacDonald. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Yeah, interesting introduction. Thank you. Apologies everybody for the technical glitch on the startup there. I am stuck out on the far end of the world, Kleinseer, West Coast, Namaqualand. and things don't always work according to plan. Will you just confirm when you can see the main presentation as a presentation? Is that up and running?
Not yet, William.
What are you seeing the presenters page?
We are seeing you.
No, I've shared my screen. It should have gone through already. Still nothing. That's odd.
Nothing.
I'm definitely shared this side, so it's all up and live. Teresa, failing that, you might want to share the backup copy I sent you this morning.
Okay, William, we can see the backup.
Let's try
copy.
again.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, that's mine. That's up. Thanks, everybody. All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. First couple of disclaimers on this one. I've been based in Namaqualand for going 14, 15 years now. I was previously working for De Beers. I'm not currently working for De Beers. In my experience at the Namaqualand mines, I've had direct involvement with 2 town proclamations and municipal services transfers, and I've been aware and followed a couple of others in the Namakwa region. This talk has previously been published at the Mine Closure Conference in 2018, so it's a bit of a rehash of that one with a couple of new thoughts and ideas thrown in. The next slide. Hold on. Sorry, slide advance. Right, you'll see that Ponderings on Town Proclamation. And there was a point in my life where the idea was that this couldn't be too difficult. And that's how we started the process around about 2011, 2012. Next slide. So I'm going to jump right to the end, and I'm going to start at the end with the lessons from the Namaqualand, and I'll then talk to those lessons. But the primary one that's coming out is do not proclaim a private mining settlement. And yes, I am fairly negative on this, but I have had extensive experience in the region as to why it shouldn't be done. When there's absolutely no way out, you still shouldn't proclaim the mining settlement. The only conditions under which you might consider something, you understand what a private mining settlement is, why it is where it is. The sustainability projects, we've got to recognize that they might actually be more beneficial to host communities elsewhere. It's critical to get the right people onto the project, and I'll speak about that specifically in terms of project leads with vested interests in the town proclamation process. Again, stakeholders are always going to be a key factor in any project, but more so when you're dealing with people's homes, their towns, and their livelihoods. It's important. The 5th point I want to discuss is that there's always an alternative, and in many cases, the alternative might be significantly more cost-effective and, in fact, simpler. This is by no means a comprehensive list. It's just the 5 items that were impacted or that impacted the plains here, Koinas. I'm going to include Alex Bay and Nababip into that group. Those 5 factors are the key impacts. I'll have a quick look at a few other items, but in a lot less detail. Just a note, this is not a technical presentation. I have no heavy academics, and there's certainly no graphs in this talk. So I hope that meets approval. Just a quick background, the Namaqualand region on the west coast of South Africa. Simon van der Stel and co. discovered copper at Springbok in 1685. Diamonds were discovered at the Orange River mouth around about 1911. And the Kleinseer diggings started 1924. The history books will tell you 1925. But Jack Carston's father actually found diamond Kleinseer in 1924. And it was a year later when Jack actually got here and started digging. Honneklip and Koinas really came along alive in 1927 with the discovery of diamonds at Honneklip Bay. Namaqualand has a number of mining towns, Springbok, copper, Okip, copper, Aggeneys, copper, lead, zinc, Koinas, diamonds, Alexander Bay diamonds, Mobile, Concordia, copper again, and Kleinseer. And in fact, looking on this, just a bit digging into this topic, mining towns throughout South Africa are quite common. To mention but a few: Kimberley, Johannesburg, Kathu, and a whole list of towns out over Mpumalanga in the coalfields areas. So this is not an uncommon occurrence. I think what makes these towns different, what it's called in distressed mining towns different, is that they really only moved into the municipal space late in their lives. And that's the key factor that I'll look at now. I'm going to talk specifically about Kleinseer town, although the lessons and the comments I'm going to make are actually drawn from all 4 towns in the Namakwa region. Very short history, and I'm not going to go into much details. I've said 1925 diamonds were found north of the Buffels River. And actually in 1927, the mining companies were sold to Cape Coast Exploration. There's an interesting story that Jack Carston's partner went to Springbok. In Springbok, he got into the pub and he proceeded to sell the company. While he was in the pub, Jack Carston's in Kleinseer hit a jackpot, and he arrived in Springbok a couple of days later with, I understand it to be £200,000 worth of diamonds. The gentleman that had signed the deal with Jack Carston's partner, Mr. Oppenheimer, promptly said, "Thank you, those are all ours, goodbye, get off our concessions." So that's how De Beers came to have the operation. Diamonds have a dirty history, and it's quite entertaining actually when you get into the final details. De Beers then proceeded to construct a town, starting in 1946 with the construction of Kleinseer. The information's up there by significant points: 1978, the construction of an electrical supply, and 1981, the construction of a water pipeline. All of this is privately owned. All of this was constructed and funded by the mining companies. By 2000, Kleinseer had 12,500 residents in 392 houses, 16 hostels of 80 persons per hostel. There is another hostel inside the mining area with a further 800 beds. There was a dairy farm, a sheep farm, a private airfield, an artificial yacht claim, name it, they had it. And then in 2012, the town got proclaimed. That's a photograph from around about 2000 and I think this was 2007 when we did the aerial flyovers. In the foreground are the Exco houses. Bottom right is the general manager's house. You can see how big that is. In the background, recreational golf clubs and others. But typical mining town, something that I think a lot of us have seen across South Africa. It had absolutely everything. There was nothing lacking, and nothing couldn't be done. How we got to town proclamation, I've put the heading up there, Mine Speak. There's a couple of slides that go before and after this that adds the detail, but really prior to, let's call it 1992, it was a sort of big town development. The mine was doing well. 1992, there was a bit of a dip in production. I think there was a global economic crisis at the same time. But by 2001, production across the West Coast, De Beers, Alex Core, the state miner, and all others were at an all-time boom. And absolutely anything was done to keep people in town and to keep people happy. 2005, the rand dollar changed, diamond production went a bit down. And I've used terms in here just to demonstrate how mining companies work. The overhead cost reduction action plan, that was implemented. But true to form at that stage, bearing in mind this is 20 years ago, stakeholder profit was regarded as the most important, and lasting contribution to communities was second, possibly a nice to have. Things were worse, and by 2005, actually 2007, the mine was really struggling, and the town became a separate management stream. The reason for this was that the town project team believed that they were onto a winner, and they took it away from the mine that was looking at closure, sale, all sorts of options. By 2008, and just bear in mind, I deleted it earlier, but the 2008 was August 2008. So this is before October 2008. The Makwaland mines went into an optimization and exit process. And the town, however, by that time, the town was operating along completely independent project lines. The mine and the town, separate entities. October 2008 changed the whole scenario. We'll talk about that now. I've put up there, just bear in mind these 2 points. I've put up there the sort of work that comes out of these mining company initiatives are statements along the lines of that. To recast the legacy of mining into a thriving economic hub and a model of sustainable development, creating low carbon enterprises and jobs based on conservation and innovative technologies. It sounds great and it sounds grand, and I'm quite sure that in most of our work, we've come across these sorts of initiatives and these sort of statements made by big mining companies. That's not, it's not an uncommon type of commodity. So where did things go wrong? And how did we go from that sort of attitude in 2008 to my current anti-town proclamation stance? I'm going to talk about private mining settlements. I'm going to talk about post-mining sustainability. I'm going to talk about the owner's transition project team. I'm going to talk about changing stakeholder dynamics and alternatives to proclamation. So mentioned in the opening slide, those are the 5 big ones. And the list does go on, and I'll touch on a few of the other items that impacted significantly on claims here. Firstly, let's have a look at what a private mining settlement is. It's no secret the economically viable mineral resource determines where the town is going to be established. In the case of the West Coast, it's a high-risk commodity, diamonds, and there were substantial security challenges. This isn't much different to some of the other towns nowadays, and other towns in South Africa nowadays, given the common occurrence of illegal mining. I'll mention that later, but security and the idea to close the mine is important. The mineral resource is usually not close to a town, and available infrastructure and mine support services are difficult over long distances. And so the solution is for a mining company to build a private mining settlement, the mineral resource being the reason for the sustainability of the mining settlement in a very specific location. Housing facilities are geared towards attracting specialized skills, engineers, doctors, environmentalists, geologists to a lesser degree, don't live in mining camps, prefer to live in well-apportioned, very well looked after towns. You have very, very high income residents, but very short-term residents, and there's a very, very high percentage of single occupants. So the company responds by providing top-class accommodation and all facilities and anything you want provided by the company. There's no low-cost housing, let's call that an informal settlement, and there's certainly no townlands, no commonage, recreation, etc., is very much controlled in the mine-owned facilities. All of this comes at a substantial cost. All of that cost is covered 100% by the company. And I've just put a flag down the bottom there. In 2010, town operating costs were in the region of 44 million rand. And the main question you need to ask is this sustainable once the mineral resource has been depleted? In terms of private mining settlements, and specific to the Namakwa region, which is dry, Kleinsie is not the only town. These water, electricity are, you can photocopy this slide to any of the small towns in the Namakwa region. By 1978, there's constructed a water supply line 110 kilometers long. It's a privately owned pipeline. Connections were added and taken away at will. None of them are mapped. Mine-style plumbing versus municipal standards were used. The thing was built to supply a mine, not to supply a municipality. There are no water meters because, well, there were at that stage no water meters because the mining company buys at the input point and decides what they're going to do with the water after that. Sewage water is taken away and treated in a privately owned facility. And I've actually added the last point there, servitudes, over 110 kilometers of pipeline. This thing crosses a number of privately owned farms. And I'll put it out there, the legal complications around servitudes or no servitudes in the last 6 years have just got out of control. Most of this pipeline at that time had no servitudes over it. Likewise, the mine needed electricity, and so there was nothing stopping them building a 120-kilometer privately owned and operated high-tension network. There were numerous high-tension substations built for the mine. These are all at a 66 kilovolt level, so this is big stuff. You need specialized skills to run it. Infrastructure placement suited the mine and skirted and avoided the mineral resource. So all this infrastructure was just placed where the geologists felt there was no future potential. On the electricity side, like the bulk water side, there was retail metering only, and extensive servitudes, again, were required for electricity. Yes, the lack of planning created some unique problems when we went into town proclamation and we started looking at the needs of it. And in many cases, electricity was probably our biggest problem. But the plumbers weren't to be undone or beat, and certainly in town, I can over a drink and something discuss some really entertaining situations involving water and electricity in town. Bear in mind that the mining company just put the services wherever they wanted it. There was no planning. Furthermore, on the private mining settlement, the pink elephant in the room was mine standards versus municipal standards. This is a topic that is very often overlooked. Private property, water, electricity in private ownership. There's no planning permissions required of any type. The town is scaled to fit a mine. There's extensive hostel accommodation. I don't think there's any other municipal town in South Africa that has quite as many hostels as a previous private mining settlement. Sports and recreation facilities are just over the top for a small rural town, and everything funded by the mine. There's a situation in the Kleinsie circumstances where one of the general manager's sons wanted to sail a dinghy yacht, and the sea was considered too dangerous. So they simply went out and built a 26-hectare yacht club. It's a fact. And that's an environmental disaster, but it exists. On the municipal side, everything has standards. Road designs and constructions, there are municipal standards, there's national standards, there's international standards, all have to apply to that. Sewage works designs and operations have to comply with municipal standards. A municipal town has low cost or formal housing. Your mine towns, any private mining settlement certainly doesn't have that. Very important in the Namakwa. I haven't had chance to see elsewhere in South Africa, but in the Namakwa, town commonage and town grazing is an important factor. And that is all funded through municipal taxes and rates, which I'll stick my neck out and say in 100% of instances, towns are all underfunded across South Africa. I can't think of any town where the municipal rates and taxes actually cover service delivery. And as I say, that's the big pink elephant in the room. This is the topic that is least talked about when discussing with the municipality. In terms of post-mining sustainability, this is a big one. Mining companies are great with this. A lot of talk goes into this. I mentioned that by 2008, town had become its own work stream, and it obviously, after the economic crash in October, there was a massive drive to fast-track town sustainability projects. I've put up a comment there: big mines do big projects, and true to form in the Kleinseer situation, the mine focused on really big projects. This is also true for Alexander Bay, which used to be an old Alexcor operation. And in fact, it's also true for Naba Beep, which used to be an old Kip Copper Company, tongue twister, a Kip Copper Company town. The aim is to make towns sustainable post-mine closure. And again, MineSpeak comes in, and we have the concept of leave a positive and lasting legacy after mine closure. Just hold those projects in mind. As I talk further through this, these are all big projects. They had major stakeholders, external role players, all pulled into them. Everything from wind farms to small scale mining. Believe it or not, we looked at uranium exploration, kelp, abalone, marine. We looked at land art as a large-scale project that's been considered in the area, tourism, and we even tapped into the, at the time, Eskom nuclear and wind farm initiatives. But here's the problem. The post-mining sustainability projects in Kleinseer were in direct competition with Port Nolloth, and in Port Nolloth, existing aquaculture projects. Tourism, it is an existing functioning harbour. The reason for the town's existence is it's situated on a transit route. It's actually a growing town, believe it or not. Competition with Springbok. It's a significant transport centre. It's got a very large, although right-sized industrial centre, and it's a major tourism hub in the flood season. Direct competition with Hornicliffe Bay. It's a tourism attraction in its own. It's sitting right inside the Namakwa National Park. It has proven aquaculture potential, and it's a small boat fishing harbour. The mining company sustainability initiatives compete directly with the surrounding towns, and it's an aggressive and fairly nasty competition. Local small industries in surrounding towns cannot compete with the mine capital. And I say that in the context of the fact that the town is only there because of the mine, my previous point in this talk. And now post-mining, you start competing with the surrounding areas. Two projects that have worked on the West Coast, both of them driven by external partners, is the aquaculture area that's just north of Kleinseer, and a group called the Strandveld Conservation Club that took over certain properties when De Beers exited and are operating them as a conservation wildlife, privately owned wildlife club. Both of these initiatives are actually running. There's nothing wrong with them, but not enough to sustain town. The third point I want to talk about is the owner's transition team. And it's a topic that is not often talked about, and in all cases to date, I get quite aggressive backlash when I talk to proclamation teams from other towns. These mining settlements are run like mining projects. They're not run like towns at all, and I've explained that in my previous point. They are managed as part of the mine closure process, although they might be run as separate work streams, but that work stream is focused on a mine house closure and exit program. And no matter how you sugarcoat it, the mining company is going to look at profit before purpose. The opposite of that is the social aspects of building the town first. But definitely mining companies will put profit in front of anything else, despite the changing environment at the moment. It's a bit of a challenging statement, but I believe it to be true. When the municipalities come in, they don't act or function anything like a mining company does. They have absolutely no idea what mining companies do and how we do it. The state, being municipalities plus other organs of state that need to be involved in the process, definitely do not make decisions like mining companies do. We all know how mining companies work. Municipalities and the state work on population movements, where people need support. They're 100% people orientated, and you can swap the word people with voters. And that's how municipalities and the state work. That's the very different mining priorities to the mining company. And I've just put two little tongue-in-cheek comments at the bottom. There's a reason why people who work for mining companies don't work for municipalities. And very simply put, mining companies don't or should not do towns. Mine staff as a proclamation and transfer team. So what happened in the case of Kleinsia is the town services team that was in Kleinsia in 2008 simply became the proclamation team. All of them were very long-term residents, all of them with very deep emotional attachments to the town. They'd spent, some of them, their entire working careers supporting, maintaining and building the town. They were looking at retrenchments and limited employment prospects through town closure. If anything, that's got to be a motivator not to do anything. However, they were given an opportunity to purchase properties in the town, and I can say that in the case of Nababeep, the properties were given away. In the case of Alexander Bay, Kleinsia and Koinas, the properties were sold at ridiculously discounted prices to company employees. And so there is a personal agenda that arises from the opportunity to buy in. Linked to the mine staff is the corporate decision-making process. Now, if the on-site team is emotionally engaged with town and they have personal agendas running as to why they don't want to leave town, what starts to happen is the best case scenarios get presented to corporate. The full appreciation of potential risks is overshadowed by optimistic thinking. There's definitely, undoubtedly, an overpromise on the big picture, and there's a lack of interpretation of what the real stakeholder requirements and expectations are. It's very difficult when you've lived your entire life in a town that looks like that, to be the person that's on the project team that's required to shut this all down, close it out, and hand it over to the municipality. I've made this slide on just to, to hammer this point home. It's a question of let it go. This is not an experiment in social engineering, and just because the mining company built it does not mean it's the best. Some thoughts on the transition team. Once the decision to proclaim and transfer to municipality has been made, sustainability actually does become everything. It justifies the why. It right-sizes the dream. Actually got to get rid of the dream and come back with a bit of reality. The idea of small-scale businesses versus large-scale mine-type support projects. It's critical to plan for a large number of failures, and town definitely won't stay the same. These are the concepts and issues that people with a vested interest in the town have a lot of difficulty in dealing with. The fourth point is obviously and always going to be stakeholders. Any big project has to focus on stakeholders. The municipality probably as one of the top two stakeholders. Your municipality is always looking for business opportunities. They need to know where the income for the town is going to be generated. They definitely look at low-cost housing. They need to accommodate informal settlements. Like it or not, it's a reality of the South African urban environment, and the municipalities are aware of this and they plan for it. In your private mining settlements, there's no such thing. Town occupation is critical to the municipalities. I put the word sustainability there, but it translates as to whether or not the occupants of town can actually pay the rates and taxes. In the Namaqualand region, there's a very high percentage of indigent occupants, as high as 40%, and indigent occupants are exempt from certain portions of municipal rates and taxes, and the municipalities are required to provide services and they lose all of that income. All municipalities, I would say, in South Africa have had previous bad experiences with private mining settlements. There are successes and there are a lot of failures. The municipalities, through their links to central governments, are aware of this, and they certainly take notice of what's happening next door, and they'll point out mistakes and errors and problems that have occurred elsewhere in the region and say that all of those problems have to be solved in the town they're now talking about. I've mentioned municipal standards, water and electricity, specifically around reticulation and distribution, that is sales to the residents, the end consumers, and then town civil infrastructure is a problem. So I'll say something quickly on that one. Civil infrastructure, I've been involved in another town. This is not Kleinsia. And with great pomp and ceremony, I was informed about the town water supply system that had been built by a very big mining company. And they had put in 12-inch pumps with a 250-millimeter pipeline from the well field to the town. And this was the greatest, biggest, and best water supply that had ever been built. And I politely asked the town engineer what size crane he needed to lift a 12-inch pump from the depth at which they were extracting water. And he told me they need a Grove, 100-ton crane. I then pointed out to him what that crane costs, how much it costs to operate it, and how difficult it is to operate it, and that the municipality would simply never be able to afford it, and the municipality would never, in the history of the town, be able to do the maintenance. I was promptly asked to leave and I haven't been invited back. But it's a reality. In the Kleinsia environment, we've downscaled everything to items that cannot be lifted by anything bigger than, or that can be lifted by anything smaller than a Palfinger crane on the back of a truck. 12 tons is the maximum a municipality can pick up. It's a critical issue and it's also often overlooked. Water and electricity bulk services are always going to be a challenge to towns, especially in South Africa, and the municipalities are aware of this. In terms of property owners, what happens in all of these private mining settlements that I've looked at is the mine people sell up and leave. Normalized town standards start to creep in. Service deliveries go down substantially. There's no ways you can proclaim a town that was built by a mine as and when needed and expect there aren't going to be earth boundaries and errors. The little GIS picture in the top there illustrates, I think it's 5 landlocked properties, fairly large properties, all of them landlocked. And as soon as the neighbors move in, they're not going to have access to servitudes or roads. And there's a number of problems like this throughout Kleinsia, and there's a number of problems like this throughout the surrounding towns. This requires very complicated servitude rights in a town. It requires a huge amount of legal input. It's actually quite a complicated issue to deal with. Commonage and grazing is an important issue. That's the entrance to Kleinsia mine after some town residents decided, no, hell, there's no town property, so just chase the goats up to the mine. And definitely your new residents don't align with the vision and the values of a big mining company. That is, in my humble opinion, a fairly normal situation throughout towns in South Africa. It's nothing we should be surprised by. We don't have to like it, but it's the reality. And having gone from this perfect utopia mine town to things that start to look like that, it's difficult with your stakeholders. Your previous happy mine employees very soon become disgruntled and annoyed town residents, and unfortunately, because they're all ex-employees, they've all got your telephone numbers, they've all got your contacts, and all of them who previously worked on email usually have the email address of the CEO, the MD, the CFO, and all the rest. And so the email wars begin, and it's quite a mess to clean that up. The third big stakeholder is the local communities. The mine staff go home. This is a town in Namaqualand. This is Buffels River. It's pretty normal. It's what a large number of residential areas in Namaqualand look like. And it's fairly big populations, relatively big populations in these small towns. Not Gauteng type standards, but given the services and availability of water, there's a lot of people that live here. These towns aren't the same as the private mining settlement. And when you get home, your income level has dropped. Community spend from the local mining company who's in the nexus process has dropped or stopped, usually stopped. And the place doesn't feel or look like it used to anymore. And so the blame is immediately turned onto the mining company. You're exiting and you're shutting down and you're abandoning. Post-mining projects, your sustainability projects, on average, I've seen don't have the same work opportunities as the big mine does. And the salary scales, the payments are usually substantially lower than mining salaries. Your CSI spend stops, and I'm saying CSI because it includes social and labor plans, as well as all the other corporate social spend that would have come along with owning a town. So the final point that I want to discuss is the alternative to proclamation. And this is an unpopular point because by virtue of the previous topics I've discussed, people are vested in this thing. They want this to work. This is home. The company doesn't want to have to spend the money to rehabilitate this. But on the proclamation side, there's over-optimistic estimation of property values. When the town is run by the mine and everything is perfect, the swimming pool is clean, the cricket field is green, there's no problems. Yes, property values are high. You get a valuator in, they look at this and they go, wow, that's exceptional. But as soon as the facilities are sold off, things close down, the company-sponsored shopping center closed down, you've got a tiny little corner cafe running, it's the best you can get. The roads fall apart, the sewage system stops working, and property values crash. And so there's this over-optimistic idea that it's going to be a high-value town. There's always an underestimation of refurbishment costs. The pink elephant in the room is that most of the mine's standard infrastructure has to be ripped out and municipal standard infrastructure has to be put in. I refer to the 12-inch pumps. There's an ever-changing political and legislative landscape. Municipalities change every four years, and each new municipality has different ideas to the previous one. On the proclamation side, vested stakeholder interests definitely play a very big role. And the mining company, no matter how you look at it, when a private mining settlement is proclaimed in South Africa, the mining company that facilitates or does or initiates the proclamation is seen as the town developer, and there's certain legal implications behind that title. On the demolition and rehabilitation side, things to consider, it becomes a mining project in the true sense of the word. Barring what needs to be taken out, hazardous material side, what can be recovered. You put a couple of big dozers in here and this town gets dozed flat in about a month. We reckoned we could flatten it in 1 to 3 months. Full rehabilitation would have taken a couple of years, but the costs would have been really low. Company definitely has the expertise. Most big mining companies have the project management expertise to do a very big demolition dozing project. This is not rocket science. And usually the capacity is immediately available on site. Remember, before the town proclamation actually is triggered, you've got all the engineers, the mine engineers, the whole gang is on site. They know how to do this as long as they don't have to proclaim a town. And the social investment, I believe, is better committed to surrounding communities, where it's actually in many cases more needed. Town closure rehabilitation might quite seriously be the easier and cheaper option. Top picture there is plant demolition in progress. It's all mechanized. It's very, very quick. And in the case of the West Coast, these are open cast mining operations. So the companies have got huge earth moving capacity. Really, you put a fleet of 10 375D11 dozers into a town and it's going to disappear fairly quickly. And the mine has usually got the techniques and the methodologies developed for rehabilitation. This is a whole different talk on its own, but it's immediately available to demolish a town. Why? Because it's not going to stay like it was. Things are going to change. This is a town very close to Kleinsia. This photograph was taken on Monday. Municipality can't maintain what they took over from a mining company. And the solution to sewage water is you remove the couplings from the pipe and you allow these dams to form. And this is throughout town are now sewage dams, and they just stand there. It's an absolute ecological disaster. So the list goes on. I'm not saying that those 5 topics are the only 5. There's a lot of other issues. I've mentioned that the town developer remains legally responsible until service delivery handover is concluded. Political interference is very real, and political interference is based on sentiment, and it's based on voters. Remember, a lot of your previously happy employees who are now disgruntled town residents are also voters, and that gets itself up to the politicians who are making a decision on town services, and it kicks back at you. Not all sustainability initiatives will succeed. It's a reality. In fact, I believe that the majority will fail without continued support from the mine. And I think we see that a lot through South Africa. There's reputational risk. Mining company, in some commodities it may not be important, in other commodities it's critical. Asbestos and other hazardous material, and when proclamation happened and the processes that followed, changing legislation and public awareness today is probably going to mean that a lot of the asbestos and other materials are going to have to be removed from town. Tongue-in-cheek comment: if you've got to remove every asbestos roof from every house in town, you might as well demolish the house. It'll be a lot cheaper. What the municipality and the community need, not what they want. I'll show you a photograph or 2 on that one now, but very often the municipality and the community are asking for bells and whistles. Everything has to be gold-plated, best standard, but it's not necessarily what's going to work and what's best fit for the town. Informal mining, I've added that one to previous versions of this talk. It's critical, and I've added informal settlements to the previous version of this talk. It's also a critical factor. True story. I had reason to take the municipal delegation through the mine to look at a substation, and en route they stopped to watch the rehabilitation in progress. We use D375, D10, and Komatsu 375s, Caterpillar D10s and D11s. These dozers are 80 tons starting at 12 million rand. I genuinely received a written communication from the municipal manager. So technical services manager had identified this machine as the machine that the municipality needed. That's a fact. It's such a specialized machine, it's just not true. I don't think the municipality could even drive it, let alone maintain it. At the end of a very along that we eventually got the municipality. That's what they need. It's a very small town municipal machine, multi-purpose, but fit for them. And there's many examples of the municipality asking for crazy things. Let's not talk about roads. Informal mining, that is what west coast of South Africa mines occasionally look like when mining stops. Very interesting dynamic. It's fascinating to watch because amongst the diggers, informal miners, let's call them, amongst the informal miners, most of them are impoverished. There's no money. They're destitute, but they are still economically active. So they're still buying food in the town. But then you get the guys that and they sit with a huge amount of money, and that money generally pours back into town. So the informal mining, while an absolute person of mining, is in many, many ways a blessing in disguise to the town. On the flip side, is that informal miners start to make informal settlements. I believe from what I've seen in the Makwaland that informal settlements are a reality of the South African landscape, and municipalities that don't plan for it are going to be in big trouble. They are in big trouble. And mining companies that believe there's no place for an informal settlement on proclamation of their private mining settlements are generally in for a big surprise. This is what parts of town start to look like when informal settlements start to grow without any control, without any planning. It's a nightmare in every aspect of municipal management. So the key lessons I'm taking away from this, wherever possible, do not proclaim a private mining settlement. It's a bad idea. Disclaimer, a little quick note on the sideline grade, whispered aside. I have had conversation with a person who is definitely in the know, who works for a very, very big mining company in South Africa. And they whispered to me that that particular mining company is sitting with no fewer than 15 private mining settlements, and they have no idea what to do with them or how to proceed with them. Some of them are actually quite big. And I have that on reliable communication that that's someone who's involved directly with all of that. And I think it's quite a common occurrence in South Africa. It's just not spoken about. But do not do it. It's a bad idea. You need to understand up front what the private mining settlement is, why it is where it is, and how it was built. You need to realize that your post-mining sustainability initiatives may actually be more beneficial elsewhere. The sort of CSI money that mining companies spend are best spent where the people live, not where the people work. And so CSI initiatives in the Namakwaland region would have been way better and achieved a lot more had they focused on the surrounding towns and not directly focused on the mining towns themselves. It's not a mining project. Get the right people to manage the process. I have previously, and I'll continue to make the comment, the town proclamation and handover team should not be allowed in any way whatsoever to buy into town. It's the worst thing possible when you tell the town proclamation manager that he's ultimately going to be allowed to buy his house at a significant discount. It's not rocket science to work out exactly where most of town maintenance money is going to go. And it's a reality. Understand what stakeholders need and not what stakeholders want. The municipality, the mine employees are to become ex-mine employees, and local communities are the big three, more. Generally have unrealistic expectations of what the area is going to look like when the mining company exits. And then definitely, I'm a strong believer now that the alternative to town proclamations might well be the better long-term option for the mining company from a cost point of view, and most definitely for the local surrounding communities. Not all risks are apparent at the start. Landscape changes, legislation changes, And the town proclamation team needs to be fairly quick on their feet to adjust to the changing environment. In wrapping up, just last two sections are wrapping up. Just for interest's sake on claims here, and this is not really a project plan or anything. It's just a couple of comments of where the town of Claims sits at the moment. It's quite an interesting town. It's a very beautiful environment. It's a very harsh environment. But in terms of the municipal process, the grand plans are all gone. There are no more grand plans. It's all been taken off the table. A couple of other points there, but town is now run as a municipal town. It is run by a mining company, but the mining company has got off the idea of providing everything, etc., etc. And there's service delivery. Everything's in. It's now run like a genuine municipality. Bulk services in this region remain a problem. The privately owned water and electrical networks pose a massive problem. And for claims here, we are currently investigating alternative options. And there's some very exciting ideas on the table, most of which are practical and workable, but they're just going to need a little push to get them over the edge. The town residents themselves, mine people who we sold the properties to in 2012 to 2016 have mostly left. New town residents have come in. They've really got their own ideas. Many of the new town residents' ideas don't resonate with the mining company. Bottom of there, it's fine. Mine now has absolutely no intervention in town dynamics and politics. It's focused on service delivery only, and the politics and town dynamics, you could do a 7-alarm program of what goes on in these small towns, but the mining company is no longer involved. And the local community engagements, the social commitments in the region are now absolutely aligned to mine closure. And so all of those commitments are heading towards closure and exit. And stakeholder engagements are now run through appropriate structures, where the reality of the town is on the table. Couple of success stories. Not everything is doom and gloom. In the Namakwaland environment, and this is true for Alex Bay as well, marine aquaculture has kicked in and become a big thing. It's a fantastic alternative land use for mining disturbances. The aquaculture area north of Kleinsia town has massive potential for expansion, and in fact they've got plans on the table to start expansion construction fairly soon. This was started in 2010 and completed in 2011, handed over to Viking Aquaculture, part of the Sea Harvest Group. It's a huge global company. They stepped in really with the knowledge. It needed the input from the external expertise, and it's actually running well. By 2023, last year, it had well over 100 employees working on aquaculture, and that's been probably the biggest success. The people that move into town, another success story. It's critical that when people move into town, the mine company staff people, projects don't try to tell them what to do, and things have happened where we would never have expected. The previous nursery school has become the Sunflower Resort. It's also become a property agent. This bottom left have become a grocery store and a security office. The town centre has downgraded substantially. The liquor store is the top priority there, I think, in all mining towns that are a reality. And the grocer comes second. And that's what town now looks like. And residents are moving in and starting to do their own things, albeit without planning permission. This is still going to be an entertaining situation, but there are now non-mining people, non-company people that are starting to turn this into home. And when that happens, it really does signify a bit of a turnaround in attitude. The Kleinsia Primary School has become a massive success. I just want to harp on this one a bit because it's my favorite topic. It's the first full service school in the Northern Cape, and I speak under correction. I think it's the only functioning full service school in South Africa. It has all three education streams, that's being physically handicapped, mentally handicapped, and normal in the same class. And it's a stunning concept that works in this environment. It started. It had a couple of hundred students, 500-600 students when De Beers was in full swing. In 2012, it hit an all-time low of 30 scholars. But middle of last year, it was up to 450 scholars. The company, we transferred a lot of properties to the school. They have hotel accommodation for 240 scholars, which they use for students from broken homes and quite serious backgrounds. It has 3 school campuses, and it has access to most of the sporting facilities that previously existed in Kleinsia. I'm very passionate about this project, and I think it's a fantastic success story. Department of Education took it over in 2010, and De Beers support ended entirely in 2015, although we are supporting it in other ways. And I believe things like the school have the capacity to become the primary economic driver in a town like Kleinsia. So to end up, to wrap up, it's a question in my mind of what exactly happened, how did we get there, and my goodness, what are we going to do next? But the project continues. The Makwaland never surprises, and it's really, really beautiful when it gets beautiful. So thank you. I think we open up for questions.
Thank you, William. There's a few comments if you want to close your presentation. The first one was from Gwen, and she said, "In short, you rock." So then
Thank
Wendy, Wendy May. Hi, Wendy. Good to see you joining our talks. She fully concurs with the demolition and rehabilitation as a preferred alternative to proclamation, and also supports the recommendation that investment in the surrounding urban areas and how this dovetails with the social and community needs in a mine settlement at the end of a life of mine. This is more sustainable, and the use of mine closure. And then Donnie Otto says, "Hi, William. Thank you for the interesting talk, insights. General, do you see tourism as a major drive, or agri or other activities? I'm thinking Gold Reef City, Pilgrim's Rest, even with town infrastructure removed and land needs to be repurposed." So, William, what's your views on that? And then anybody else who has questions can type it. And William, I think I'm going to give over to you because you can read.
Okay, I just need to find the chat window. Thank you, Donnie. I'm going to answer that partly tongue in cheek, but partly seriously. I wouldn't consider Gold Reef City or Pilgrim's Rest to be stunning successes. I think when I last went through Pilgrim's Rest about 3 years ago, it was looking pretty dismal, and it really wasn't in good shape. Gold Reef City has become a entertainment park that's actually got nothing to do with the mine that's currently there. I'm pretty negative about it. So tourism is a small attraction on the west coast of South Africa. The type of tourists that we get here are not looking for big mine experiences, and so we see tourists coming through town, these off-road 4x4 convoys. They come into town, they drive around town, and they go out and they stay on the guest farms in the adjacent areas. Tourism has a place, but it's not a big attraction. The West Coast marine environment is also extreme and unforgiving, so there's very little tourism initiative in terms of the sea. So it doesn't have the capacity to build itself into a tourist town. Also, there's no real roads that get here. West Coast is pretty inaccessible. Any other questions or answers popped up? Let's have a look. Anya, do you want to control? There's a hand up.
Okay, first, Willie Faber has typed a question there. Hello, Willie. He asked, could you please give us a feasibility of a big solar farm in the area? Would this not be something that would resurrect town? And then I'll get to you.
Thank you for the question, Willie. There are no fewer, and I speak under correction, there are no fewer than, I can count 5, 6, 7. There are no fewer than 7 huge wind farm projects in the area. Fortunately, the main Eskom supply line goes right through the area, so the option of tapping into that is quite good. The reality of wind farms, and this is a scary thing, we've looked at it, and I've looked at it extensively. The reality of a wind farm is you need several thousand people during the construction phase. The construction phase for a 300 turbine wind farm just north of Kleinseer town was projected at exactly 18 months, after which the entire workforce leaves the area and the whole farm is run with a core and very small maintenance crew. So yes, wind farms are a very, very short injection, after which everybody gets up and leaves. We saw this with the construction of the national 400 kVA line. We had almost 200 people living in town. They put the line through just outside of Kleinseer town, and within 12 months, 200-300 people packed up and left and moved to the next town south. It's not a long-term sustainable option.
I've just been informed by Teresa that everybody's mics are open. So Johan, you are next. Thank you.
Yeah, firstly, William, good presentation, and I just want to commend you on the work that you guys have done, and basically post-closure situation, and I know your negativity about the town proclamation, but looking at the alternatives, I think you guys did great work. Just to give you a bit of background, I'm the land management and sustainability specialist for a mine, and yeah, if you look at the problems that exist with towns that spring up around mines, whether it be mine towns that were created by the mines or informal mines, there's a league of legacy issues that one needs to deal with, and I think what I've seen, and it's basically more a comment than a question, is that each of your areas, or each of your towns, the solutions will be site specific. You cannot always just move your problems to another area, because you'll be creating other problems in other areas. And okay, well, the one question that I think that I would like to ask is, how have you experienced government buy-in into the proclamation of these old mine towns? Were they positive, or were they just basically expecting the mines to continue paying and supporting until the end of days?
Thanks for that, Johan. It's actually a critical question. It's a very important question. To start with, you have a major challenge in government when you want to demolish a town. Government will tell you can't do it. So you get this very, very positive drive from government. Let's do this. Let's proclaim this town. Let's get people living in it. But the minute you do that, and you go down that road, things start to change, and the government changes their tune, and they go from, you have to proclaim this town, we won't let you demolish it, to wait a bit, we want the following, and they come with a shopping list, and that's where that's where the train comes off the rails, and so your government engagement up front is critical, and I believe that you could sell a town demolition to the government by going back to your previous point, and that is dealing with your legacy issues elsewhere. And I think what would have been a better scenario in Kleinseer is if the company had started the project by saying, how are we going to move all the positive from the town into the local towns? and how are we going to then demolish the town, keep the legacy issues at home, and demolish the town. Take one example, the Kleinseer School, right? Stick my neck out. It's a shining example. It's beautiful. If you ever come to Kleinseer, I'll introduce you to the school. I love them all, but I will go as far as saying it should have been built in Komaggas town, which is 45 kilometers away. And if the mine had have started with the departure point, let's demolish the school and let's move the whole thing to Komaggas. Man, what a difference that would have made. And then you simply take the local school out with bulldozers. So your legacy issues, you can deal with them elsewhere at the same time as you keep the bad at home, and you close the bad as part of mine closure. And I think that's quite a critical, but yes, government is a difficult one to deal with. They do not like demolishing towns. Thanks, Jan.
Any other questions? We still have a bit of time.
There's a couple of questions for requests for the presentation. It has been presented elsewhere, so I have no problem sharing the presentation. I will pass it on to Anya and Teresa, and they're welcome to spread it, to distribute it further. Sorry, there's one more question there.
Sally?
Hi, good morning. Yes, thank you. It was actually really interesting listening to you talk about a town that my husband and his family actually lived in back in 1979, 81, so long before the town got proclaimed. But yeah, but my question to you is, how do you think that the legislation with specifically the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act should change to actually sort of cater for this, your personal observations to avoid the proclamation of towns?
I think to a large degree this has already happened, and I'm coming now to the fly-in, fly-out scenarios. I think if I had to stick my neck out to the extreme, I think that the construction of private mining settlements should be forbidden entirely. A mining company should not be allowed to go down that route at all. And I think the mining companies have changed in that, certainly in the Australian context, and more so now in the South African and elsewhere in Africa, you are seeing companies putting up contractors' camps on the mine, and you run a fly-in, fly-out roster. And I think the MPRDA and the environmental legislation has to change. Stick my neck out, absolutely forbid the creation of private settlements, be it mining or other. And okay. I think we have changed. Sorry, yes, Sally.
Good. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, William, there's two other questions, and I think the first one would be good regarding your geology experience, and then to Melo, and then yeah, so please check there.
Which
on the chat, wise man?
Yeah, the safety measures in place to prevent occurrence of hazards such as sinkholes, in particular in areas where starting out. So just to answer that question in a slightly broader context, the process of town proclamation is not simple. It requires a host of studies. There's everything from econometric studies, transport studies, geotechnical studies form a major part of town proclamation, as do floods and environmental studies. Before the local authorities will start to sign off on town proclamation, you do have to cover all of that. So yes, the measures are most definitely in place to safeguard against things like sinkholes, floods, almost every aspect that I can think of are covered in the requirements to proceed with a proclamation. The challenge, and I'll stick my neck out very far here, is the challenge is that the mining companies, the really big mining companies, and I include everybody in that box, the really big mining companies have the ability to bulldoze these specialist studies through quite fast. and quite aggressively. And the government and the state usually doesn't have the capacity or the competence to do a true review of what the really big mining companies are presenting. And I think that's where vested interests inside the mine or inside the mining company start to push the wrong agenda. The long way around to answer the question. The studies are done, but I think that it's sometimes driven. It's driven by personal agendas. There was a comment there about resettlements. The most recent resettlement was Dingwall. I think it's Dingwall in the Kathu region. And I actually don't know what came of that, whether they succeeded in doing it. The resettlement for the purposes of mining under the town is probably the easy one, because there you've got a justification to move the people and demolish the town. I don't know if that answers the question. And then from Rita. Again, if I could just comment, answer to that one, Rita Kiba, the Rosh Pinah and Oranjemund are following town proclamation processes. I did in the talk mention a 12-inch pump, and I did mention that I'm not welcome, and I can add to you that I'm not really welcome north of the Orange River anymore. I spoke my opinion. Yes, these towns are being proclaimed, and if you've ever been to Rosh Pinah, you will see, in my humble opinion, that Rosh Pinah has even less of a reason to exist than Kleinsia has to exist. And as far as I'm concerned, the best and in fact the only thing that can be done with Rosh Pinah is to bulldoze the whole town. There's absolutely no reason for that town to exist in the Namibian context whatsoever. And I've speaking really nastily about some other company, but yeah, it's a tricky one. Alrina. The challenge with eco-villages or privately owned villages is in the same dynamics that will take on a... Sorry, Rina's question is, have you looked at eco-villages or privately owned villages? The challenge is, if there's no reason for the town to be here, then you can eco it as much as you like and you can private as much as you like. You're only going to get the weirdos moving in. And I say that in all honesty, it's happened. There is no fiber network to Kleinsia. So if you're not communicating, and hence some of my IT problems, but there's no fiber network here. So if you haven't got a satellite link out of here, it can't be a comfortable remote location to sit at. There's no Woolworths, there's no Pick and Pay, there's no Checkers, there's a little local cafe. The sort of high-end incomers that want to live in a private eco-village don't want to live in a small ex-mining town out on the fringe of nowhere. So yes, it's an option. We also looked at medical tourism. There's a 1.5 kilometer runway here. You can't believe what the company built. There's an 82-bed hospital. There was. It's not there anymore. We looked at private medical tourism. We looked at that seriously. We looked at private public participation prison complexes. We believe it or not, we looked at turning most of town into a prison. Again, your logistics over the distance, water, electricity, they're problems that are almost insurmountable. They're actually problems that are burning town at the moment. So your eco villages are great, your privately owned villages are great, but you're not going to attract the right people to come and live in them. Are there any other questions coming through? I can't see anything on my side.
Mosito also asked,
There's another one.
Yeah, Mosito asked, is there a very good example where proclamation was done purposefully and it turned out to be a success?
I'm not aware of it. I really don't know of an example. I'll stick my head out. I was in Pilgrim's Rest a while ago, and it's not a shining example of post-mining sustainability. It's a fairly, I don't know, say some nasty words. I just don't think it works. Donnie, Johannesburg and the big ones, Kimberley, Johannesburg, Katu, a couple of other ones, Mpumalanga Coalfields, Witbank, Middelburg, these sort of places, yes. I think what made them work is that they were on major transits, and then the mine came along at the same time. So bottom of the line, Johannesburg as well. Yes, bottom of the line is, I think location is going to make or break it more than the mine. I don't know if you've got an opinion on that, Donnie, or if you.
I was just teasing, thanks, William. My little hometown of Barberton has got that exact problem. It's sort of out of the way. It's not on the way to anything, not even to the Kruger. It's just too far out the way. And I think Johannesburg was just big enough. It was, I think, a quarter of the world's gold was taken out in Johannesburg. So it sort of evolved. It was sort of a forced economy. But yeah, as you say, Kimberley, Witbank, maybe a few others, as long as it's en route to somewhere or there's something happening in the area. But yeah, I was just sort of teasing. Johannesburg wasn't planned at all.
It is very fun. Critical, actually, very interesting thought. Whether there is a critical mass, whether there's a critical mass after which a town becomes automatically sustainable without any other reason for existence, and it might be worth looking at something like that. Anya, your hand is up.
Yes. I just want to touch on Alrina's comment on an eco village. I think the one problem that most mines have, and that's my gripe against the whole town proclamation, is you are sitting basically in the beginning with a farm and not proclaimed erven. And as far as I know, you can't just sell that or subdivide it under one of the acts, the land acts, and it has to be transferred to a municipality, and that is usually where, so that it can be proclaimed in smaller erven, and I think that is usually where the whole issue of town proclamation is also very unobtainable by mining groups. And I don't know if you've got some more information on that. Thank you.
You're 100% correct. You can't. There's no ways that you can turn a farm into a town willy-nilly without full buy-in. The process itself is also not simple. It's a lengthy and complicated process. I've mentioned there's a vast amounts of studies, technical, environmental, social, that have to be done before the correct boxes are ticked. The challenge is, I said it in the talk, the challenge is that the mining companies, a really big, aggressive mining company, potentially has the expertise, the capacity, the momentum needed to push through what might be perceived in their view as a good idea. And the local municipalities, you're now talking local municipalities, can be swayed. They can be swayed quite easily in terms of demands and requests and all sorts of things. Insofar, I don't make a recommendation, a facilitation payment becomes a genuine risk. And when companies are looking at several hundred million rands worth of demolition and rehabilitation, versus a perceived income from the sale of the town, you can see where I'm going. The tendency is then to say, well, let's hand this over to the municipality. And the companies, I believe, have the capacity to bulldoze it through. It's not necessarily what's happened, but that capacity is there. Yeah. Anya, does that answer your question, Johan?
Yes, so there is a comment from Rindani then, and then Wiseman had another question for you, and Johan then. as well.
Is it Wiseman? Your comment there is the town proclamation of Clainsia specifically started in 2007 and it was finished in 2012. So you're looking at 5 years. I understand that to be fairly standard. Alexander Bay also took 4 or 5 years. Nababeep happened a lot quicker because they donated the whole town to the municipality, and that in itself was a total disaster. So you're looking at 5+ years to complete the process of proclamation. I'm not sure what you mean by none is known to date. There are quite a few proclaimed mining towns. There's 5 of them in the local area in Namaqualand. Johan, it's agriculture. Agriculture should be the basis for the economy, and it doesn't have to be agriculture. There can be any economic activity post mining. In the case of Clainsia, we've pushed very hard for aquaculture. It ties in with the provincial development program. The challenge is that no form of agriculture is ever going to compete with what the mine was throwing into the town. And so you go from a mine town of 12,500 people to an aquaculture farm or a tomato farm or whatever agriculture you want to put in there of 100 people. The numbers don't match. And those agricultural activities cannot support the type of lifestyle that the town offered when the mining company was pumping in 40 million rand a year. It's not viable. It's not viable in the agricultural sense. And again, I come back to what Donnie was saying. Somewhere there has to be a critical mass after which the town is big enough, but it's not agriculture. Thanks, Wendy. Thank you. Anything else coming through, Anya? I think we're spot on time.
Nothing else. I think some of the mining people need to join. Oh, there's another one of Arina. Sorry, Arina. This one was more information on that would be great. Thus, you have to go through town proclamation and then back to privately owned. Is there an example of a privately owned town that's fully privatized for providing all services, water, electricity, sewage, and waste management? Isn't it something like Marlof Park or some of those places? I don't know.
So thanks. There's 2 parts to that question. Firstly, yes, we have had extensive review as to whether you can unproclaim and reverse the town back to private ownership. And no matter what legal company, no matter who we get to look at it, the answer is in South Africa, you can't unproclaim a town. And I don't have the name, but there are a couple of examples that I have previously looked at of abandoned towns, completely abandoned towns in South Africa, and they still cannot be unproclaimed. The only example I know of a fully private town is Oranje. I understand that it runs quite well, but it's based on political ideology more than anything else. And so some interesting dynamics on the west coast of South Africa in that regard as well. But no, they haven't bought Clainsia. That's the only private town I know of in South Africa that is supposedly run well. I've never been there. Thanks, Anya.
If there's no other questions, we want to thank you from LaRSSA's side for putting in the time and being so honest and clear on certain issues. And William, you should actually share your email address if somebody wants to contact you for consultation in the chat. And then I want to thank all of our people on the line. I don't know if you're all LaRSSA members. If you're not, please join, and please make time for attending our conference in September as well. And look at our Facebook page. we will share more Tech Talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you all.